Hi everyone, it's Julie again. In my last two videos, I talked about the Tylenol and autism debate. First, kind of what the science shows, and then why our language around autism matters. And today I want to focus on something that's a little bit more practical or tangible, and that is how to be a confident consumer of health information. We can't always control how leaders or headlines are going to frame health issues. But we can build the skills to recognize when a story is solid on its own or when it might need a little bit more context. So I think this matters because health science is really complex, but the messages that we hear are often really simplified down into dramatic sound bites, like Tylenol causes autism. That's really memorable, but it is not the full picture, or it's rarely the full picture. And being a confident consumer of information does not mean having all the right answers. It means knowing how to listen and to ask questions and to recognize when maybe it's time to look a little bit deeper than the headline. So, here are three listening tools that I want to talk about. The first is to listen for absolutes. If you hear words like always or never or causes, that can be a good cue to pause. In science, very few things are that certain. More balanced messages usually sound less dramatic. Things like may be linked or still being studied or shows an association. Those are a lot more likely to have more of the context included. The second tool is to learn to notice what is missing. So ask things like, what details are not here? Was the study really large or really small? Did it mention any confounding factors like the reason that someone took the medication in the first place? When a story is missing details, that often means that the story is incomplete. Not incorrect, but incomplete. And the third tool I want to talk about is paying attention to framing. How are people being talked about? If the language makes it sound like the goal is to eliminate certain people or certain conditions, that may be more about fear than about balanced information. So here's an example of how to apply things like this. If you hear Tylenol causes autism, you might ask, is this based on correlation or on causation? What size was the study that this evidence is based on? If you hear something like autism is an epidemic, you might wonder, what does the framing of that statement suggest about autistic people? Is this message about health risks, or is it also aiming to shape how we view autistic lives? So I think that some of those small questions can help us move past some sound bites and into a slightly more full picture of what's going on when we hear things in the news. Um, Being a confident consumer of health information does not mean distrusting everything. It means knowing how to listen critically and to spot when more context might be needed and to ask thoughtful questions so that you make sure that you are understanding the information well for you. And I think that when we do that, we can protect ourselves not only from misinformation, but also from the fear and stigma that can come from really oversimplified headlines. Thank you so much for joining me as I unpack kind of this week's news. I hope that I can keep sharing useful tools and perspectives to help navigate these conversations with a little bit more clarity and confidence. And until the next time, I hope that you will keep making space for each other and listening and be well. See you soon. Bye.